as the Atlanta Falcons get ready to take on the LA Chargers. That still sounds weird to say. How about this? We're going to give out some grades. So, yeah, it's a party. It's time. So, let's go.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So which offseason acquisition, if any, has lived up to the hype, we'll discuss. And the NFL sent help in the form of a buy. So who do you hope it helped the most? We'll talk about that. But first, let's go to the classroom to see who excelled and who needs to bring his grade up. So Jarvis, of course, will look ahead, but let's put a bow on the before the bye season and at the same time kind of look ahead. We're talking grades here. Give our coaches a grade. Let us know why you gave them that grade, but let us know how they can improve their grade, starting, of course, with a win against the Chargers Sunday. Let's start with Coach Raheem Morris.
I would give him a B, because the one thing that I've been really impressed by is his knack for when to go for it on fourth down. I feel like that's been something that I've really been impressed with. I appreciate, because for me, I can be a little conservative when you talk about going on fourth downs. And I know like a lot of people are depending on analytics, but it feels like, Raheem kind of uses his gut, kind of goes with his gut when it comes to those situations. And I think that that's the thing that I don't want him to lose, because he has a lot of confidence in his offense. And I feel like the last couple of games, maybe may not consider, going for it in a certain situation, because they haven't had that much success in trying to get points on the board. So for me, I give him a B. And of course, dealing with his, leadership and who he is as a person, I feel like if they're going to get this thing turned around, he's definitely the guy for the job, in my humble opinion.
So B is a solid grade. What do you think he can do starting with this Sunday to maybe improve to a B plus, A minus, kind of move up with his grade for you?
It has to be, for me, like getting more involved with the defense and not necessarily taking over play calling and from Jimmy Lake. But I think that him saying, hey, man, I understand what the scheme is and what we're trying to do, but like we need to have conversations with our DBs and down and distance situations. Like let's really dig into the details of what needs to happen in certain situations, so we won't be out here looking crazy, and letting guys just score on us at will.
Yeah, got it. And that's consistent, Jarvis, with what you've said in terms of not wanting to necessarily part ways with Jimmy Lake, especially at this point in the season and at this point in his first season as defensive coordinator, but more of, hey, Raheem Morris does have a great defensive mind. So how can he maybe assist Jimmy Lake, like you said, in situational football? So for you, Aaron, when you look at what Coach Raheem Morris has done so far in the season, what grade would you give him? Why would you give him that grade? And what can he do to maybe improve if he needs to improve for you?
I give him a B plus. I feel like, the last two games have sort of that recency bias has sort of made me want to knock the grade down. But then when I look at the rest of the season as a whole, like it's definitely deserving of a B plus, with the way, going back to that conversation we had after the Seahawks game, with the way the team responded after that game, and sort of learning about this team. And, with last week being an exception, this team has responded well to adversity this season. So I think after the bye week, to raise that grade, you just got to win games. Like that's really essentially, if the Falcons just find ways to win, it doesn't have to be pretty. They just got to get back to winning football. That grade potentially can creep up into the A range.
What about you, Tori? When you look at, and I love the fact, Tori, that Free made a great point. We oftentimes do have that recency bias where we're like, fans have the hair on fire because of the last 2 games, whereas you can be a little bit more objective in looking across the 11. So when you do look across the entirety of Coach Morris's resume for his first season as head coach with the Falcons, what grade would you give him? Why? And how can he improve for you, if at all?
Yeah, I think I would say a B plus as well. And I think there's room to grow into an A for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think about, from my perspective, being in-house, being around this staff, being around Raheem, being around these coaches and and these players and seeing how they interact with each other.
Yeah.
I think that there is something to be said about the leadership that I feel like he possesses, that skill set that he has to command a room and to make everyone in that room feel like they're an important part of the room. And I do think that he is somebody who over his career has shown that he truly is. Coaches say all the time that they're a player's coach. Yeah. I believe it when he says that. And I believe it when he's interacting with players and hearing players talk about him for that reason. And also kind of knowing how things were before he got here. Mm-hmm. I can't go any lower than a B plus in my mind because of all of that and because of the changes and the way that it feels in the building in comparison to years past. Even though, okay, the record isn't exactly what you want it, but I don't feel this sense of like absolute defeat that maybe I felt at different points in time. And I feel like this roster wants to go to war for him. And I think that is a sign of somebody who is a good leader. So I would say B plus with an upside to A.
I like it. And Free, it's interesting when I think about Zach Robinson, because I'm thinking about what Tori just said as far as B plus for Coach Rod trending up to A. And I can remember at the beginning of the season, maybe more than any in this 3-man group, he was the most maligned. But as you said, we're looking at the totality of the resume. So when we do that, what grade would you give OC Zach Robinson? Why you give him that grade? And where do you think he can go up, if at all, for you for the rest of the season?
Well, if you had asked this question like 3 weeks ago, I probably would have given him an A, and it feels like, again, I'm going to give him a B plus with the caveat that this probably is the easiest one to probably get into the A range. If this offense can just start performing like the well-oiled machine that they should be, I think, getting towards at this point in the season. And, obviously, again, going back to recency bias, we haven't quite seen it the last couple of weeks. But I think if they can show that they can perform better against quality defenses, which has been kind of their bugaboo so far this season, when they face quality defense, they have struggled to move the ball. And they'll have an opportunity these next 2 weeks against the Chargers and Vikings. I feel like this easily can get into the A range because I feel like Zach Robinson has, been kind of, of this trio, and not to knock Raheem Morris or Jimmy Lake or anything like that. But in terms of, this team's success hinges on their offense, and a lot of that success is owed to Zach Robinson.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's this one of those things where, as far as Zach Robinson goes, I think it's when you look at like the scoring piece, and I think Aaron made a great point as far as with the way this team has been constructed, you have to lean on this offense in this particular situation because at one point they were scoring about 24 points a game. They kind of dipped down, obviously, with the last 2 games. So I think that, in order for Zach to get to that A level, like Aaron talked about, figure out, what's going on when teams will start to lock you up in man coverage, like figure that out, because the Chargers, they tend to run a little bit more zone scheme, but are they going to switch things up because they've seen how teams have been successful against you by running man? We shall see. So I feel like, having the game plan, what you're trying to do, and then if teams are starting to read that little book that's out on you in these past couple of weeks, being able to have a counter for that. And I think that will bring Zach into that A range for me, because I give him a solid B plus, like just from, of course, taking these last 2 couple of games into consideration.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm in the exact same like B plus range for Zach. I think that people forget that this is a first-time coordinator, a first-time OC, first-time calling plays, and I think that it was something that I think my expectations were pretty middling going into the season. And I think I will be honest, I think that he has exceeded my expectations to this point in the season. Now, are there ways that there can be more consistency in this offense? 110%, absolutely. But I think in terms of how he is calling games, I've liked what I have seen. And I think that there are some times where execution and penalties have gotten in the way, which, to be honest, he can't really control that. He can't control if somebody's holding or whatever. So, anyways, I would say in that B range for sure.
Yeah, and Tori, let's talk on the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned first-time play caller. Same thing on the defensive side with our defensive coordinator, Jimmy Lake. What grade would you give Jimmy? Why that grade, and how can he go up?
Yeah, so I don't want to be too negative, but I do think that the reality of the situations is what it is, and the statistics back it up. So I'm going to probably say a C-. And I think some people would say I'm being way too generous. And I will let JD or Free say what they want to say. I be more production, just point blank period. I think that they have gotten away with a lot of things specifically because of maybe some guys that they have in the secondary. But what is happening up front, it's going to be the difference in you winning and losing games. And I think we have seen that start to happen. So for that reason, I think I have to give a C-.
Yeah, I'll give since we're taking in the totality of the season, I give a D+. So because here's the thing, y'all. Like, y'all understand, like, defensive line is like my heart. This is what I wholeheartedly believe. And when I see guys out there just not being productive, when I've seen production, shoot, sacks last year, what's going on? And we didn't really see him get more reps until Lorenzo Carter got hurt. Why? Why is that? Why are we hiding him? Like, is there something that you all know that, you don't want to be revealed? Is he not worth that second round pick that y'all traded up for? So my whole thing is, like, man, put it all on the table. Lay it out, dude, because I don't think he's going to be able to get to an A. That's not possible. I don't even think he's really going to be able to get to a B. But I think that in order to be average, have an average grade to end this season, I feel like Lake is going to have to start implementing some things, like saying, man, like, I know zone is where we are. That's where we're supposed to live. But, man, you're going to start playing some man coverage, Jack. You just paid all that money to AJ Terrell. Shoot, use him. Hey, play some man, dude. Lock up. But send Caden Ellis some more. Put Judon in some situations where the corners are pressed. Let's see what he does. If the corners are able to reroute and he gets maybe one extra half a second to a second to be able to do a move and put the quarterback on the ground, man, make him live up to it. Because if he's calling you out, shoot, man, put him in position to be able to be successful. That's your job. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
For me, part of me wants to give him a C+ just to make Jarvis look, worse, more negative, but or a C- or something like that.
I'm a big dude. I got big shoulders, bro. It's all good. Yeah.
I'm going to give him a D+. And this is where I do think recency bias is going to influence it. Like, again, you asked me a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have given a C- like Tori did. Like, the defense hasn't been good, but it's been good enough in a lot of ways to win games. And so I think he can get back into that C- territory if this defense can just perform. Again, no one's expecting this to be a top 10 defense at this point in the season, and probably shouldn't have had those expectations going into the season, at least if you were listening to Locked On Falcons. And so, like, the performance of the defense so far, to me, is not as probably a big disappointment as it is maybe to other fans. But if they can get back to just, if the offense is, this team is basically built to win games like 28-24. And if they can just give up 20 to 24 points a game like they were earlier in the season, and those are games that they can win, and it doesn't have to be pretty. It's just like, at the end of the day, if we're going to play the Oreo defense or the bend but don't break defense, whatever you want to call it, and just stop giving up explosive plays, stop giving up, touchdowns, all that sort of stuff. If they can just get back to playing that style of football, we can get back into C territory for Jimmy Lake after the bye week.
Yeah, another way we can get back into C, maybe even C+ territory for Jimmy Lake is if those acquisitions from the offseason actually pay out and do what they came here to do. We'll talk about it when we go under further review. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Hillsdale College. So time, of course, is our most precious commodity. Don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, history, econ, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Maybe those are things you studied in school, maybe not. But even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. So Hillside College, which of course is our sponsor, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Introduction to Free Market Economics. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players or plays for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Now, with Prize Picks, it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Now, if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. So download that app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, after you check out Atlanta Football Party, download the Prize Picks app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So, Aaron, it's time to take a look at the other side, right? The front office. We know that there were some big free agency acquisitions. So before we go to talking about those acquisitions, let's talk about the person who was primarily responsible for it and grade him through these first 11 games. What would you give Terry Fontenot for those acquisitions this offseason? Kirk Cousins, Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, and why would you give Terry that grade?
I'm going to go with a C for Terry at this point in time, just because the defensive additions haven't really moved the needle in, I think, in the ways that we thought. Obviously, bringing in Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney has, really helped the offense in a major way. And so if we just look at the sort of the offensive things, like, you probably argue that's an A. Defense, not so much. And so for me, I'll go with a C for Terry at this point in time, just with the offseason acquisitions. And I think part of it, maybe again, my bias, like last year when we were talking about the offseason acquisitions on defense and other ways, it was like those were like the best players on the team last year in terms of Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell and David Onyemata and Caden Ellis were like 4 of the 5 best players on their defense last year. And so like you're not getting that same impact. And so maybe I'm a little jaded by that. But I think overall, like Terry has done and then you couple that with like the draft class not really doing a whole lot this year. So it's like that's where I'm down to a C at this point, even though Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney have been, very positive additions to this team so far this year.
Yeah, and Tori, I kind of purposely left the draft class off because I know there have been some challenges with injuries and the like. So I was like, okay, we'll just kind of focus on the acquisitions. And I know that there is still controversy around that first round pick. And I know whenever we say that name, it takes people in a different direction. So I figured, okay, we'll be nice. We'll stick to the acquisitions. What about you with Terry? But if you want to invoke draft, I'll defer to you, Tori.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a B- because I think I have to think about what the intention of these acquisitions were. And I think the players that I'm sure Terry and the whole front office thought they were going to get did not turn out to be the players that they got. Now, the reason I don't put that down to a C like Bree is because they did not give them deals. They got them on they're just here for this year. Now, granted, the Judon losing a 3rd overall draft pick, I think, is really, really tough. But at the time of that deal, that was heralded as a really, really great deal, and that the Falcons, let Terry cook, all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to to see the difference in what it was when these deals were made versus where we are now, 12 weeks into the season. And so that's why I can't knock down to a C, because I think, looking back at the decision, I actually think it was a really, really good decision. I think if you get the Matthew Judon of the last 2 years before his injury, and his injury was not to his legs, I think that's the thing, is I understand completely why you make those moves and why you do what you do. And Darnell Mooney and Kirk Cousins, and then of course talking about Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon going into the season, that's a huge get. That's a huge development for this team. Is it panning out that way? No. But is that necessarily Terry's fault? I don't know, because I think if I'm put in the same position and I have the chance to get Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons and Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney, heck, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So that's my reasoning for it. And draft class, I'm not going to talk about the draft class. Because that would make you did not tell me to grade based on draft class, so I'm not going to grade on draft class.
Thank you, T. I appreciate you, because I know the rabbit hole that can take us down. Jarvis,
and you don't want to know. No one wants to know
at all.
No one wants to know.
Jarvis, take us through with just the draft, just the acquisitions, no draft, and give Terry the grade from that perspective.
I'm giving him a strong B, just because of bringing in Kirk Cousins. Because here's the thing. Quarterback play has been atrocious these past couple of years. It has been awful to watch. It has just been so
burns your soul.
It burns my soul, T. You understand? You feel me? You understand me on this thing. So for him to bring Kirk in, and also Darnell Mooney, because a lot of people are looking like, why you give Darnell Mooney all that money? He ain't do nothing in Chicago. He had a 1,000-yard season, a couple years ago. So, what's the deal there? Leading team in reception. He's pretty much your go-to guy as far as being a man beater, on big down. So I think that, I have to give him, I have to weight that part of it, right? Because just looking at the way this team is constructed, so for me, I have to give him a B. But like Tori mentioned, the intent was there. The intent was great. Like Judon, I was on board with it. He was getting a sack a game before he got hurt last year. So who would have thought that he would be sitting right here? With 2.5 sacks on a season. So I don't think that, I can't knock Terry for that, to be honest with you, because if you look at it on the surface, it made a lot of sense. Justin Simmons made a lot of sense because you didn't really have too much confidence in, Richard Grant and/or, DeMarco Hellams at that safety spot. And he's a former All-Pro safety, so you would think that he would give you something there. So, yeah, I got to give him a B. And with a lot of weight towards Kirk, bringing in Kirk and Darnell, because, if you building this team to be, the offense to carry it and the defense to come in and make plays for you, get you a few turnovers, give you a couple extra possessions so you can get to that 25 to 30 point mark. It made sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to ask you guys if you can give us a little grace, because on the other side, I'm going to ask if there are any grades that can actually improve on the other side of these 11 weeks from those free agency acquisitions. We'll talk about that when we get back in What's Next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you placed your bet. So visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys. So we talked a little bit about the acquisitions that Terry Fontenot made this offseason. Let's talk about those acquisitions and kind of where we feel they are grade-wise, why we give them that grade, and what you need to see from those players in the game against the Chargers Sunday for them to maybe improve their grade. So Jarvis, for you, let's start off because you talked about what made you give Terry that high grade, and that's QB1 Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think if this team has any chance of getting to some momentum and getting into a point where we believe not only are they the best team in NFC South, which is not that high of a bar, but they can get into the playoffs and be one of those teams to at least win one in the first round of the playoffs. So I think that, and Kirk has to be that guy. He has to be the guy. He has to be the guy to lead this team. He has to be the guy to not turn the ball over. He has to be the guy to make sure Kyle is locked in. Make sure that Drake is locked in. Make sure that the offensive line is doing what they're supposed to do once they get back fully healthy. So, and I think that that's the big thing too, getting healthy. That's the thing that's gonna, I feel, help this offense, because Mooney had a hamstring issue, he had to sit out. So hopefully he's healthy and getting like his guy, like he can count on. I feel like Darnell Mooney is that guy. So Kirk is going to be the guy that's going to have to drive this train if the Falcons want to have some semblance of a playoff run once they get there, after they win the NFC South.
And Tori, what about you? When you look at what Kirk's done in the first 11 weeks of the season, what's your grade for him, and how can he improve that grade if there's a place for improvement in winning the game with the Chargers Sunday, starting there?
Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement. I think Kirk Cousins would tell you that as well. But I do think that what he has been able to do and what he's been able to infuse, and going back to a point that Jarvis, I think, made earlier about what the quarterback position was before he got here, I think it was and I think what Free has said before, like putting an adult in the room, like all of those things have been apparent for Kirk Cousins so far in 2024. Now it's just finding that consistency. Now it's just kind of sometimes taking care of the ball and making the right decision more often than not. And I think so for that reason, I do think it's an A, but I think that it's because also I have to go by recency bias too, knowing how not good the quarterback position was the last couple of years. And so I feel like my threshold for quarterback play is very different these days than maybe it was when Matt Ryan was quarterbacking this team. So that's what I'll say. But I think he has been at times he has been exactly what you wanted and needed him to be. And it's being that over and over and over again.
What about you, Free? Where do you think
with Kirk, I'm going to give it a B plus because I feel like Kirk has done what you wanted him to do, which is sort of stabilize that position. As Tori just said, be the grown up in the room, provide consistency at that position. But I just want to see a little bit more of the high end play from Kirk against those quality opponents like we saw against the Bucs and some of those other games so far this season. And I just want to see a little bit more of that down the stretch, again, at the point in the season where like this offense should be closer to firing on all cylinders and being that well-oiled machine for me to get it back into that A range. But certainly during the month of Kirktober, I was very much in Kirk being, getting graded an A, but it's sort of come back down a little bit back to the B plus range. So I think Kirk has been mission accomplished, but I do feel like the ceiling is a little bit higher, and we need to see a little bit more of that to really get that enthusiastic A from me.
So, Tori, I'm going to go with the Oreo effect for this segment. Since we started positive with Kirk, we're going to end positive with Darnell. Let's talk about Judon and Simmons in the middle. Start with Judon. What grade would you give him? And we know he can improve. So how can he do it starting this Sunday against the Chargers?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't think that it's just him. I think that it'd be unfair of me to say that the Falcons' pass rush problem is because Matthew Judon is not getting to the quarterback. I don't think it's fair. I also go back to something that he said about playing within the role that he was assigned to play, and I think that matters as well. I'm gonna give him a C, but that's with a caveat that I don't know what he's being asked to do, and I don't know what others are being asked to do. And because of that, I have a hard time really, really, truly knocking this group. And Justin Simmons, I'll say probably a B-. I think that just because he's not been kind of the flashy Justin Simmons that we expect him to be, doesn't mean that he's not affecting things. I think he's maybe given up a few more plays than what he would want, a few big plays that he would want to have back. But I'll give him a B because I do think that his insertion into the secondary has been a difference maker for this group.
What about you, Free? Judon and Simmons?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit more positive on Simmons with the B-. As Tori said, you're not getting sort of as many impact plays, but I do think the overall presence has been definitely a stabilizing force for that, where you had a lot more up and down play with Richie Grant last year. I think with Judon, yeah, I mean, it's hard because like I'm kind of in the opposite mindset of Tori of like putting it all on him, just because like it felt like the Falcons were like, hey, this guy's going to single-handedly save our pass rush, and he hasn't done that. And I don't think it's fair to judge him by basically like, you aren't the savior, and so therefore I'm going to give you a really low grade. But I'm going to give a really low grade. So it is one of those things where I was like, I'm going to give it like a D+. It just has not lived up to expectations. It has been a disappointment. Again, I don't think that's all on Matthew Judon, but it is kind of that situation where, you know, the sacks be damned or whatever, but like the fact that he's not even getting pressure at anywhere near the rate that he has throughout his NFL career, to me, is really where it's troubling. And again, as Tori said, some of that may be owed to the scheme, and certainly I know Matthew Judon thinks it's owed to the scheme. So I you know, he probably knows better than I do, but it is one of those things where it is still a massive disappointment that even if the sacks aren't there, like you're not getting pressure nearly at the rate that you thought you would get this season from him.
Jarvis, that silence is troubling. Judon and Simmons.
Let me start with Simmons, you know, because I do feel a little bit better about Simmons than, you know, I do Matthew Judon from a play, just from a overall play standpoint. There are times where I feel like Simmons has kind of been like, okay, what was that, you know, type situation as far as whether it be coverage in a coverage or in run support. You know, I think that there's some room for improvement. Like, so I probably have to give him a C, just from, you know, C+, you know, C plus type, that range. You know, I'm kind of iffy on Simmons because given what he's the type of player that he's been, when you bring in guys like this, you know, of that age, and they've had so much experience in the NFL, it's hard to expect that they're going to continue to give that type of play. If they were giving you that type of play, they wouldn't be a free agent. They wouldn't be out on the street, right, a few weeks before the season starts, right? So I think that for me, I have to give him a C, you know, a C plus. That's kind of where I land with him, just because there is some consistency for the most part when it comes to his play. So that's really that's all you can ask for, given what the previous person that was in that position. Now, as far as Matthew Judon, I'm sorry. Like, he gonna have to get that F from you, boy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to give it to him because I got to go off of how I was coached when I was in college. I understand the scheme. We played a lot of soft coverage. We played a lot of cover 4. We rarely played man coverage, you know, on our defense. And guess what? Somehow, some way, as a defensive lineman, we figured out ways to beat the guy that was lined up in front of us. Imagine that concept. You know, I'm being blocked one-on-one. Well, I ain't get. I got double team like quite a bit. Play nose guard and all that stuff. But like the guys that played beside me, they were lining up one-on-ones. And they just magically beat their guy with us playing that soft coverage because we were really consistent with it too. And we played it really well. Now, I'm not saying that, the Falcons aren't being, having with this secondary, like those guys, have been playing, did a solid job all year. You see the upgrades, that they made in the secondary with Mike Hughes and the way he was playing and before he got hurt, and then AJ Terrell, obviously. And you got Jordan back there in the back end of the defense. Simmons, consistently inconsistent, but consistent when you need him to be. Like all those things were lining up. So it's hard for me to, as a former defensive lineman, to sit up here and say, it's the scheme is the reasoning for me not beating somebody one-on-one when that's all you got to do, beat the man in front of you. And I just haven't seen that. I really haven't. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go with F. I know I'm getting
Understood. Well, we always want to end on a positive note. So real quick, Aaron, give us your grade. We don't have time to talk about why, so just give us your grade on Darnell Mooney.
A. Exceeded expectations.
Yeah. How about you, Jarvis?
A plus. Shoot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Tori, wrap us on a good note.
Yeah, A+ for Darnell Mooney, without question.
Love it. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta Football Party Monday and Thursdays for a double dose of all things Falcons. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, no party this Thursday, but happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you Monday.